Hi, my name is Owen Casey Stevens, and this is the story, or really the stories, of why jumping off the roof always seemed to work out for me as a child, but jumping on beds did not. I want to preface this by saying that I jumped off the roof several times as a child, and that was stupid, and the fact that I never suffered serious injury from that fact is sort of made up from what happened anytime I jumped on the bed. As a child, I liked the idea of being able to fly. I read Peter Pan, I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I was familiar with the concept of you fly by jumping at the ground and missing. So it really seemed to me like a good idea to jump off the roof of my family house. And we had a sort of very steep backyard that got quite deep quite suddenly. And so I climbed a tree, or actually a mulberry bush, next to our house, got on the roof, saw that there was an area that had very, very tall grass, which I was certain would be soft and would catch me if it didn't work. I ran and I leapt off the roof and I hit the ground and I went oomph. And that was really it. Now, if I had been a smart child, that would be the end of this part of the story. I think you can tell from the fact that I'm still talking that I was not a smart child. It just occurred to me that probably most people who tried to fly gave it one good running jump and then stopped. So maybe the problem was that it just took a few tries to be able to fly, right? I mean, that makes sense. So since I was okay, I climbed the mulberry bush again, got on the roof, took a running jump, and leapt off onto the ground. I did that 3 times that day until my mother finally noticed me falling past the window of her bedroom, which was right by that big grassy area I kept leaping into, and was sort of, I'm going to go horrified that she thought perfectly reasonable child felt that flinging himself repeatedly off the roof was a good idea. Now, in my mother's defense, she did not have any reason to think I was going to be fine. One of the reasons she didn't have any reason to think that is that when she had, a couple years earlier, bought a new bed, a very springy, king-size bed with a big, thick mattress, my sister and I had gotten really excited about the idea of jumping up and down on her bed, and she made it very, very clear that we were not going to be allowed to do this normally, but this was the family's first big, new king-size bed mattress. So, okay, just this once, just as delivered, you can jump up and down on the bed. And so we did. My sister and I jumped up and down on the bed on alternating ways. We were having a great time until I slipped and fell on my arm and broke it. I broke my arm jumping on a bed. Flinging myself off the roof of the house, fine. Jumping up and down on a bed, broken limb. Now, I recovered from that, and I thought my mother was being quite unreasonable to tell me I shouldn't jump off the roof, because these things are obviously not related. A year or two after that, on vacation, my sister and I were jumping up and down on the bed at a hotel, and my mother was allowing that basically because it wasn't her mattress, right? But also because we had been supposed to go out and it was raining, so we were a little stir-crazy, and I think she figured this was a nice, safe activity, and we were jumping in alternating patterns, so my sister was high while I was low, etc. And it might be that if I were jumping in a bed by myself, I'd be fine. It's just the addition of my sister that always made this not work out well for me. But on one of those jumps, my sister was high, I was low, she was flailing, and she kicked me in the temple and kicked me off the bed onto the ground. I didn't break anything, but I was blind for about 20 minutes. I was blind just long enough for the paramedics to show up, shine a light in my eye, and say, oh yeah, it's beginning to dilate now. He might have had a temporary or hysterical blindness, or it may have just clocked him, or seems fine. We went by the hospital, but they determined there was nothing but a bruise on the side of my head. It was after that that I decided to make my second run at jumping off the roof. It was a few years after the first time, and I was a little older, and clearly no wiser. And there was a section of my house that had a 2-story section as opposed to a 1-story section because our backyard was so steep. So I flung myself off the 2-story region of the roof, because my new theory was that it's not that you have to jump off the roof multiple times, it's that you need enough time to really get that sense of what being airborne is like. That hurt. I jumped off the 2nd-story part of our house, and it hurt. I didn't damage myself, but it was painful, and thank God I was at that point smart enough to conclude, hey, if you could actually fly by throwing yourself off of a roof, yes, there'd be a lot more dead people, but someone would have worked it out by now in the history of humanity and been spotted. So that was the end of my leaping off the roof experiments. Mostly I had some friends that had a trampoline, and we would jump off the roof of their house onto the trampoline and then get flung into their pool. That worked fine, but I did always wonder what would happen if you timed that wrong and got flung into, say, a wall, or they had a metal fence, or but it worked out fine all the times you're doing that. But the older I got, the more I realized that maybe gravity was in fact a law, and I stopped. And I had long since stopped jumping up and down on beds, because that stuff will kill you.